these types of things, And so the way I look at it, I got a different approach to it. To me, this is about cattle production, okay? It's all cattle production for me. The thing I've got is how can you do cattle production, do it well, and if you do this stuff, then basically what you're going to do is you're going to end up benefiting the environment. If I try to do the environment thing first, people just don't buy into it. But if I can tell you can make money doing this stuff and improve your cattle production, then you're going to be more likely to do it. Because right now, cattle prices are not doing good, okay, right? And so, and to tell someone that they do need to do water quality stuff, well, what's the incentive? But if you can do it and actually make money, then you're going to do it, right? Because I got a professor that told me years ago, more producers lose more money on their farm than they will ever make at the stockyards. And I believe that wholeheartedly, okay? We waste a lot, okay? A lot of it is during this time of the year when we're wasting animals basically in mud, okay? And then we're doing feeding and stuff like that. We're wasting a lot of forages because the diet increases because they get covered with mud and that soaks up the hair coat and they need more energy. And fescue just doesn't provide the energy that they need, especially when we pick EPDs for milkability, that kind of thing. So we need to do a better thing. So, first handout, first page. What this is actual research data, and it looks at the losses going from 0 to 100%, losses of forages, okay, based on how you feed your hay, okay? So the scale goes from 0 to 100%. So let's say that we have no feeder. We just go out in this field and we just set a roll bale out there, or we actually unroll it 150 foot in length, okay? Now, depending on what's going on, like on our farm, okay, we can lose like 90% of that forage if it like rains 2 hours later after we roll it out. So when you look at this data on the far right, it says no feeder, and it's got a range going from about 97 down to about 35, right? And that little square in the middle of that spread of data is the average. So on average, we're losing 58% of our hay by having it out there where they got full access to it, okay? Now, and 50% of the cost of raising an animal is in the feed. So if we can save some money on not wasting forages, then we can save some money on the farm. Then you go basically to the, all right, third one over, ring feeder, okay? Right there. Nice, tight cluster of data. Real nice and tight. And that's basically 20%. So if we use a ring feeder, you're only going to waste 20% of your forages, okay? The reason why I bring that up is to bring up this, okay? So this structure right here, got a long rack on it. You basically load that rack up, depending on your herd size, okay? You would basically bring in a group of animals through one of these gates. They come in, they eat, they don't have full access to it, they got to stick their head through, okay? And then there's some technology on that so that they don't, pull a lot out when they're, eating and stuff. So, but you don't see a lot of wastage, but we're not feeding a lot of hay right now anyway. But the idea is you use this one structure to serve multiple pastures. In this case, this one serves two. There's this one right over here, and there's this one over here, okay? If that wasn't an orchard over there, I could set up a lane or, some other configuration, and I could use this one structure for at least 3, if not 4 pastures, okay? So then behind you is the hay storage structure, okay? So from the standpoint of not generating mud and so on and so forth, I could take a tractor, pull in on this gravel road, spear that hay, load it into here, and I am not going in my fields. I'm not rutting out my fields. I'm not compacting. I'm not creating nasty mud mess. The animals, on the other hand, they come up. We got gravel lane approaches with geotextile fabric and rock. It's fanned out because animals don't walk in a 90-degree angle. They come in, they eat, they leave. There is no water associated with this structure. If I had a water in there, they would never leave it, which means that's more manure for you to clean up and manage. This is a system where you're using this structure in conjunction with rotational grazing, where the animals come in, they eat, and they leave. If you're doing your job, then that animal is a 4-legged forage chopper manure spreader, all self-contained. And so it should be distributing that manure out in the field, which means that you have less to clean up. What we do clean up actually gets hauled to the other side on this other lane that we got. We got a covered manure stack pad. We can store it underneath there. It can drain, it can dry out, compost a little bit. Come spring, we can take that out. We'll probably put it on Bermuda grass because that wicks up a whole lot of nitrogen and phosphorus. We'll harvest that, turn around, feed the cattle, and the cycle continues. But as far as surfaces, geotextile fabric and rock is the approaches, which is great. But this is concrete. It doesn't get any harder than concrete. If you're going to scrape it, You want to have it in concrete because rock, it's just a deferred cost. Over time, you're going to end up scraping all that rock away. You're going to have to replenish it. You should have just done it in concrete to begin with, okay? So there's that, okay? So any questions on that so far?
How many cows will that feed on each side?
Basically, now here's the other thing, good question. What we've done is a buddy of mine came up with this structure as part of a watershed project, okay? So he came up with it and he said, Steve, I need you to run with this. So I said, okay. So I did a publication on how to manage this structure and also ran it through state cost share. So you can get this structure on your property and get cost share to fund it. At the time, it was $7,500, up to, it's $7,500, 75% of the cost up to $7,500. I actually changed it about 2 months ago. This is 15 grand now. But to answer your question, Charles, basically I assign, on a rule of thumb, 2 linear feet of bunk space per head. If you're going to deal with cows, you're pushing it maybe about 2.5 feet, 27 inches. But basically I use a rule of thumb of 2 feet. So normally the rack is on the cost share is 32 feet long. So that's 16 and 16 on each side. You can get about 2 or 3 more on the back side. So you can use this for about 30 some odd animals. I know a guy that's got this structure, okay? So he brings in a group of 34 cows and calves. As they're coming up on a heavy traffic path, what we call a walkway trail lane, the calves split off. They go into a creep feeding area. The cows come in here, they eat. After so many hours, he kicks them out, okay? Brings in another group around 29. And this is all with heavy traffic paths and lanes. And so he's bringing them in from 2 different pastures, 2 different groups. The calves go in and they creep feed. They put on some additional weight, for fall calving, that kind of thing. They're not commingling in together, but one structure serving 2 different herds. It's awesome. He's also got this linked up with his handling area, so he can bring them up and work them through a handling chute, load them in, load them out. He's got his hay storage close, and then the manure that he's taking off is going farther away, basically on some hay fields, so he's getting a benefit out of that manure, okay? And so he gets a yield return off the organic matter and the water holding capacity of that manure, the CEC, how it's going to build up in the soil, the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Okay? Does that sound pretty good? Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
So,
answer the question. Why would you not put a roof on it?
Why would you not put a roof on it? You could put a roof on it, okay? And see, the thing is what it's designed is you want to put the hay in the rack. It's designed to feed your animals for 3 to 5 days before you have to come back and load the rack up again. If you're feeding a good quality forage, then they'll be able to reach it all and consume it. You'll get a little bit of a pyramid triangle down in the center, but when you take your next roll bale and load it back up again, you can push that all the way to the very back. But to answer the question, back in the day, the NRCS had a covered winter feeding area with an adjacent manure stack pad. It was an awesome structure. 40 feet wide, and the length was dependent upon, I guess, the herd size. But it got abused, supposedly, okay? And because that's taxpayer dollars. People were putting in a basketball goal, parking a combine, right? So the state, they took it away from us around in 2007. And so I thought this was a good idea. And with that center rack down the middle, since it's not covered, they said, we'll cost share. But there's no reason why you couldn't build one on your own and you could put a roof over it, okay? We'll actually talk about that in a little bit, all right?
How big is that facility?
I don't know. I know it's the 40-foot wide. I think Roy wanted about 50 feet long. And we changed the design in a meeting day before yesterday, with the NRCS. We're actually going to add another 8 feet on the length. So it's going to be 40 foot wide, 48 foot long, with a rack that's 8 foot wide and 32 feet long. Because I thought the transition around the corner as far as pushing that manure and scraping it up, just a little too tight for certain pieces of equipment, so I asked him to extend it. Since we increased the cost, it shouldn't be a problem. Okay? All right, so now, let me blow you away with a little math, okay? So I was doing some calculations. You can go to this page right here. I was doing some calculations on my own. And this is an interesting, different way of handling it. You've never heard this before. Ready, set, go. All right. The average man in North America weighs 177 pounds. All right. I would say basically cattle weigh 10 times that. Can we agree? Yeah. Agree. Good. Okay. Yet, even though a cow weighs 10 times more than a man, it produces 47 times as much solids, okay? And it produces, you don't want to know about the BOD, but biological oxygen demand is on there. That's 20 times. Nitrogen, phosphorus, and fecal coliform is 30 times more than a man, okay? So basically, on average, what you're looking at is one cow is equal to 30 people, okay? Now, pick a herd size. Mine is 40, okay? 40 cows on a farm. I got an agreement, okay? So you got 40 cows on a farm and you're doing a winter feeding area. My rule of thumb is I'm going to have one cow per 1,000 square feet on an earthen lot. We in agreement? Pretty close, right? So that means you're going to have 40 cows on less than an acre, all right? But if I do the math, what that also means is that is the equivalent of having 1,200 people living on your property on that acre without any handling facilities for no porta toilets, okay? You with me? It's like a concert right there in your backyard. You with me? And that kind of puts it in perspective. Then you take the runoff, the rain, you know, how we select these pads. Maybe we'll have them next to a creek, these winter feeding areas, so the animals can get water, because who wants to deal with the freezing water? Okay, you with me? Does that make sense? Does that just expand the impact of this? Which is why a structure like this, to me, placed on a summit location, not near any water, we can scrape up this manure, not create a whole lot of mud, have all this nastiness, is a good plan. So, any questions on that? That's an interesting way of looking at it, isn't it?
We can remember that one.
Yeah, you can. I mean, just, I don't know. I mean, most people, they think of some concert, hippies in their backyard. I'm going to look at cows in a different way now,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, let's go to another page.
The other page is basically, what this is soil test phosphorus data on an actual farm. So you can see the barn, and to the upper corner of that barn is a winter feeding area. So that's why it's all brown, right? And so the guy built the barn. He's got drainage running right through the barn. It's running right through it, okay? And so what you're looking at is soil test phosphorus data. Now let me tell you about this data. University of Kentucky says basically if your soils are over 60 pounds per acre soil test phosphorus, you do not need to apply phosphorus fertilizer. The real number is actually 45. So anything over 45 is not going to give you a yield benefit. Anything over 200 is probably an environmental problem, okay? The other thing you also need to know about soil test phosphorus from the standpoint of animal production is this. The more phosphorus you have in the soils, it actually changes the soil chemistry and makes that soil hold more water, which means it's going to be easier to create mud the higher the phosphorus gets. There's also other imbalances that you can get as far as the phosphorus tying up calcium, magnesium, zinc, so on and so forth, right? And so that creates imbalances in forages if we were feeding them. But then you look at this data coming out of the back of that barn and around that way. I mean, it's over 900 in some places. It's off the charts. So then, I mean, again, it goes back to that winter feeding area where you have that runoff. We got this huge amount of phosphorus and nitrogen and potassium and everything else, and it's not giving us a yield benefit. So again, scraping it up, putting it where it needs to go based on the soil test value to bring up some organic matter and utilize those nutrients, to me, is how we can save and make some more money on the farm. Okay? All right? Is that good? Any questions? Okay. You want to go for another ride? We'll go someplace else?